Well, hi there everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. It's about 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. It's the 1st of June today, first day of winter. We're at home here on the south coast of New South Wales, Australia, where we live. And I'm sure by the time this video goes to air, plenty of people will know what's happening tonight. Tonight there's quite a good southern aurora forecast, and we don't normally get the southern aurora that much here where we live. It's only a rarity, maybe once a year if we're lucky. Areas further south obviously get it, but tonight the southern aurora is forecast to be really strong. I'm not one that follows all these apps and so forth. I really only know when the southern aurora is happening when someone tells me about it. Friends or other photographers tell me, and I see things online or whatever, but apparently tonight it's happening. I've already had a couple of friends send me messages through social media telling me that the aurora's happening as we speak. Lisa and I were quite content sitting in a warm house eating our roast dinner tonight, having a glass of wine, but we've been convinced that there could be a bit of activity happening out there, so we're going to go out and see if we can get some photos of it. Just had a couple of friends send me a couple of pictures, so it looks like there's definitely some southern aurora action happening tonight. One thing I just wanted to touch on when it comes to the southern aurora, or the aurora, whether it's southern, northern, whatever it might be, when you go out to photograph it, there's a couple of things. First thing is to keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it. You can get a good shot. If there's some good light in the sky, you can get a good shot with some pretty simple camera settings. It's not that difficult. I'll talk you through that shortly. But the most important thing, without any doubt, is to make sure you get a really good composition. A photo of some colour in the sky is great, but it's not really a compelling image. It's like any other form of photography, landscape photography. If you want a good photo, it needs to be a strong, solid composition. So I really would encourage you to try and find a really good foreground subject, a really good composition, and almost make like the night sky the second part of the image, if you like. Anyway, enough rambling. What I'm going to do is get my camera here. I'm just going to grab my 15 to 35 2.8 and we'll get out there and see what we can come up with. But I'll film a bit of video, see how we go in the dark, see if we get a photo, and hopefully we can bring you guys along, and hopefully we can even get a couple of good shots. Okay guys, we're in the car, we're on our way out. Lisa's actually driving tonight. We've got to get some fuel. The old fuel light's just about on in this car. So yeah, hopefully we can get out there and get a couple of shots. Couple of things I was just going to point out while I've got a bit of light here rather than talking to you in the dark about it. Camera settings for shooting the aurora, or even for astrophotography. I always tend to keep this stuff super simple, because the last thing you want to be doing when you're out in the dark and you can't see what you're doing is fluffing around with camera settings and different things that you're not familiar with. So normally what I do, I shoot my lowest aperture. I've got an f2.8 lens. It's my 15 to 35 Canon lens. I set the camera at f2.8. I'll start out with a shutter speed of 15 seconds. I will vary the shutter speed depending on what is actually happening in the sky. If the aurora's not dancing or moving around very much, I'll tend to drag the shutter speed out longer, so maybe 15 to 20 seconds. 20 seconds would be my maximum with a wide angle lens. But if the aurora is visibly dancing around and you can see the beams moving and things are happening, then I'll tend to pull the shutter speed back, and I could come back to somewhere between 7 to 10 seconds, somewhere around there. It just depends. I just experiment. But they're the settings. f2.8, or the lowest aperture you can get on your wide angle lens. You want to be shooting fairly wide. Shutter speed starting off at 15 seconds, and then you can vary it from there. You can go up to 20 or come back to 10 sort of thing. I normally just turn my ISO on auto. That's one less setting you have to worry about. If you've got your ISO on auto, you don't have to worry what ISO you're using. I don't care about ISO. Some people get hung up on having a really low ISO. I just let the camera do its thing when it comes to ISO. That's one less setting you got to fumble around with when you're out in the dark. The other thing I normally do is I turn my exposure compensation on my camera one stop overexposed. Now that will depend on how bright the sky is. I might vary it again if the sky is really bright, or if there's a huge amount of moonlight, for example. There is a tiny bit of moonlight tonight, which I actually like, but we'll see. But that's how I would generally do it. I would rather get a photo that's almost not overexposed, but really, really well exposed than one that's a bit under, because that's how you end up with noise. If you've got a photo that's underexposed in the dark and you're trying to bring it up, you'll just end up with noise all through your photo. Speed camera, Lisa. Whereas if you have a photo that's almost a little bit overexposed, you can bring the exposure down, and you won't add noise by bringing the exposure down, where you will add noise by bringing the exposure up, if that makes sense. The next thing I do is the white balance in the camera. So you've got a lot of settings in the camera where the white balance is already set. I don't really use any of those for the night sky. I normally use a manual white balance. So if you go into the Kelvin setting under your white balance, if you start off around that 3,400 Kelvin, somewhere around there, and then once again you can vary it depending on what colours you like, but I normally start off around 3,400 Kelvin. If you're not familiar with the manual white balance setting and you want to just put it on one of the preset white balances, I think there's one called, is it tungsten light? Tungsten light, I think it's called. It's about 3,200 Kelvin. That would be not a bad starting point. Next thing you need is just to get a really good focus point, and that's just where you're going to use your head torch or some sort of light to light up something in the foreground, or sort of a third of the way into the scene where you're shooting. Get some light on it, get a really sharp focus on it to have a good focus point. That's about it. We're going to stop at this petrol station, get some fuel, and then we're going to get out and do some shooting. Hopefully there's a bit of Aurora activity and we can report back soon and show you a bit more about what's happening out here tonight. Alright guys, so we've just got out. You can probably hear the these ocean waves crashing behind me here. We're keeping an eye on them because the tide's coming in. There's a little bit of a swell. We got on top of this big sort of rock shelf. We've travelled about half an hour from where we live. We've come to this location because we know it really well, and it's good to know a location well when you're walking around in the dark. And the second reason we've come here is because we believe, hopefully, there's not going to be any light pollution here. So you don't want any lights from houses or campsites or anything like that. So just taking a quick shot. I'll spin the camera around. So that's the back of my camera, so I'll just show you the settings there. So we've got f2.8, ISO 5000, 15 seconds, one stop overexposed. So there's a bit of colour there, as you can see, the colour of the Aurora, that sort of reddy maroon glow is definitely there. There's no beams, like big beams coming up, but they were around about half an hour ago because a friend of mine sent me a couple of photos and it looked pretty good. So we're going to move about 100 yards from where we're standing, find a pretty solid composition and just dial it in and just sit around and wait and see what happens in the sky. Those settings on my camera look good. For the moment, I'll just run with that. I did all the exact settings that I spoke to you about earlier. I've got the white balance on manual Kelvin 3,400, which looks pretty good. So yeah, we'll just see if the Aurora really starts to dance along in the sky. We can adjust the shutter speed to suit. But there is also, the moon is up to the west, and it's only a tiny slither of moon, probably about a sixth moon. Hopefully if that moon gets up a bit higher, They might actually put a bit of natural light on the foreground as well. So we'll move over here a bit further and see what we can come up with. All right, guys, well, it's getting late out here. We've been out for probably 2 hours now. When we first got here, there was a little bit of aurora happening, but nothing major, just that sort of glow in the air. The colours, you know, most definitely there, like that sort of nice maroony red type colour. Got a few shots of that, but there's been no sort of real apparent aurora, like no real apparent sort of big beams, which is what we're looking for, or no really mega bright sky. You can't really see it with a naked eye, even with the lights out. We've experimented with a few different bits and pieces. We're not about to give up just yet. I've actually turned my camera in the complete opposite angle, to the aurora. I'm facing more towards the northeast now, and just experimenting with a couple of shots of the Milky Way, actually. And a couple of those might actually come out all right. Lisa's about 30 metres behind me here, so I'm not sure what she's shooting. She seems honed in on some sort of a composition, so we'll see what she's got. But I might have something to show you from the Milky Way. We'll see. We'll persevere a little bit longer. I'll report back soon. What I'm going to do now is just spin this little camera around and probably try and show you the back of my camera screen, what I've been capturing, and yeah, we'll go from there. All right, I'm not sure if you guys can see the back of my screen. I've got a vertical shot of the Milky Way, another one. Looks a lot brighter on the video camera than it does in reality, but a little bit of a sort of puddle in the foreground there, a little rock pool. Just experimenting. That one was a good shot. That's the reflection of my tripod with the head torch going in the background. Another little rock pool. These are some of the earlier shots. These are all Milky Way ones. I'll come back to the ones. These are all Milky Way ones. That one there's actually got a really good view of the Milky Way. There we go. That looks better. I just touched the screen to drop the exposure a bit. That one looks pretty good. These are Aurora. There's a little bit of Aurora happening in these. Just touch the screen again. You can see a little bit of glow in the sky there, a little bit of Milky Way. I'm a pretty harsh critic when it comes to photography, so these could actually end up being quite good shots. I'm just a bit hard on myself. I won't know till I get home and get a look at them on a computer screen, but who knows, it could be something there that's pretty good. We'll see. If we can get 1 or 2 shots to show you, it's going to be worth this little adventure. All right, guys, we're back in the car. We battled it out for about half an hour longer since the last time I spoke to you. No aurora whatsoever. The later it got, the less aurora there was. That's not to say it won't fire up again, who knows. It only fired up, I was talking to a couple of other people that were out shooting earlier in the evening, and they said it literally only fired up for about 15 minutes at one stage early in the evening, which was about 8:30 or something like that, and then after that it was just been nothing, a little bit of glow, and in the last half an hour was literally nothing at all. So got a couple of decent Milky Way shots, so I'll probably edit a couple of those up. Lisa's got a couple of decent shots too, so we'll see what we can come up with. We're heading back home now. It's about half an hour to get home to where we live from here, so if we happen to get back home or close to our house and it looks like the aurora's going to fire up again, we might continue the video and go to our local beach and grab a late last minute shot there, but if not, then we'll probably wrap it up. I won't end now. I'll wait until tomorrow when I'm sitting back in the office with a bit of daylight and just give you an overview on what's happened. If I've got any decent shots there, I might show you a couple of those, and I might even have a quick edit even of one of these images and just show you what I do with the editing. We've got a cherry ripe. Oh, this road's very bumpy. Holy smokes. Oh. Holy. Lisa's not known for driving slow on this road. Holy. Okay, guys, I'm back. Just been to physio for my whiplash that that I just got from the bumpy road. What I was about to say before, we've stashed a cherry ripe and a Turkish Delight chocolate bar in the console of the car here. So we're going to eat those and head home. Might even have a glass of red wine when I get home before I go to bed. Watch the Formula One Grand Prix, which is on tonight in Spain. All right, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow from the office. Okay, guys, welcome back to my home office. It's now the following day. We didn't see any more Aurora action last night, so we decided to come home and take the rest of the night off. The Aurora wasn't amazing last night, but it wasn't too bad. We still managed to get some good shots. So what I thought I'd actually do today is I'm just going to actually go over one of the images that I captured last night and just give you a bit of a quick edit on this image. So I've got the image opened up on the screen here. This was actually one of the images I took in the other direction to the Aurora. The Aurora is obviously to the south. This was sort of facing northeast, and I got a nice view of the Milky Way. It was a really clear night. So yeah, I thought I'd run you through a little bit of an edit here. And when I'm finished this edit, I am going to show you some of the images that both myself and Lisa captured last night, the final finished products of those. But just thought you might be able to learn a little bit from this. Now, this image was taken, if you have a look over here at the settings, f2.8. ISO 8000, 15 millimeters, and a 20-second image. If you have a look at the histogram, you can see that it's reasonably well exposed for a nighttime image. One thing when you're shooting at night, you've really got to make sure you expose the image quite a way to the right. You don't want an image that's too dark. Hence the reason why, pardon me, I'll often set my exposure compensation to 1 or 2 or even 3 stops overexposed at night time, just to have a better exposed image. All right, I'll walk you through this image, pretty much how I'd go about editing a nightscape image. First thing I do is lift the blacks up. I normally lift the exposure up a little bit. Just got to be careful you don't go too far with the exposure, because you can add noise. I tend to leave the shadows pretty dark, and the main reason for that is if you lift the shadows up too far, you tend to add a bit of noise to the image. So first things first is just the exposure and the blacks. And if you zoom in and have a tight look at this photo, you'll notice there's a bit of noise there. Pretty much happens on any nighttime image, but we're pretty lucky nowadays because we've got the new denoise. So if we go in here under the, I basically just do the real basic stuff at the start. So all I did there was lifted the exposure and the blacks a tiny bit. I might go to the curve here and just lift up the black on the curve, just lift that up a little bit. I'm just looking at the histogram here so that it's stopped clipping and it's just got a slight little 1 or 2 millimeter gap on the left hand side. So you pick up the curve on the left and just lift it straight up, probably to about there. No, it's gone up by 7. The next thing I'm going to do is a bit of noise reduction. Now, if you've got one of the latest versions, I'm actually using Adobe Camera Raw here, but if you're a Lightroom user, you'll totally get what I'm doing here as well. Exactly the same. If you've got one of the new versions of this, you need to have a Wi-Fi connection to use the AI denoise. You come down to the detail tab, and there's one here that says noise reduction, denoise, that box there. Manual noise reduction, the old one down here, that's not AI. This one here is. So we're going to click on that, and that's going to bring up this box on the screen here that says enhance. This is the noise reduction. Now what I do with this, if I just move my little box thing here out of the way, you can see this little box. That's where it's actually displaying here on the screen. I tend to move that down to one of the darker areas of the photo. You can just click there like that. So somewhere dark in the image down here is a good spot. And then it gives you a little preview of it here, and you can see how much noise reduction you're using. Depending on how much noise is in the image from the start, this is a nighttime shot, ISO 8000, so it'll have a little bit of noise in it. This denoise slider normally defaults at 50. I tend, depending on the photo, I tend not to probably go to 50. I normally sort of run between 10 and 40. And then you can see here, if you just hold this down, that's before denoise and that's after, before and after, before and after. That's 40. I might take it up a little bit more. Let's take it all the way to 50. I never go above 50 ever, basically. There you go. Look at that. That's got rid of most of our noise. So if we click enhance, that's going to tidy the photo up nicely for us. Next thing I'm going to do, this takes a while to run through. My computer's pretty fast, but it's running through it pretty quick. It is using the internet or data, so you do need a Wi-Fi connection for this to work. Okay, that's given us, and it'll give you two copies of the image when you're finished here as well. It'll give you the original. If I pull up down the bottom here, you can see there's now two images. There's the original RAW file, and it'll give you what it calls the enhanced image, which is normally the denoise version. I'll just pull that back down so you can see the image. Next thing I tend to do here is break the image into two zones. I edit the image for the sky and I'll edit the image for the foreground. So let's go on to the sky. First things first, if we come over to our masks, we want to select sky so that we've got a sky mask. That's going to make a mask for the sky. 3 dots next to the mask on the right hand side. Click on the 3 dots. It'll say intersect mask with. I'm going to go linear gradient, and I'm just going to bring a linear gradient down from up quite high down the sky. I don't want to take it all the way to the bottom, probably about there. And I'm just going to drop the exposure a little bit on the sky, probably about that far, nearly 3/4 of a stop, like that. And now I'm just going to bring the foreground up a little bit. And the easy way to do that is once again on the right hand side, where your masking is, create new mask, select sky. And now once it's selected the sky, I'm going to hit X on the keyboard and that will actually invert it. So that turns it from a sky mask into a foreground mask. And now I can start to dial in on the foreground. So I'll just lift up a little bit of exposure on the foreground to about there, and just lift up the whites a little bit on the foreground to about there. Now it's a nighttime shot, so you still sort of want, you don't want it to look like it was taken in the middle of the day. You still want it to look quite dark. That's starting to look good. Basically what I'm doing is just trying to balance out the exposure between the sky and the foreground, hence why I darken the sky and brighten the foreground. So that's sort of looking a bit better. You might even lift up the blacks a little bit on the foreground to about there. That looks pretty good. Now we'll go back to the original image so that we're editing the whole image and not a mask. And we're just going to lift up the whites. We can lift the whites quite a way. If there's one slider that's your friend, it is the white slider. So let's lift that up quite a way, up to about 40, 45. That's already starting to look good. Next thing I'm going to do is just tune in onto that Milky Way a little bit and just make that Milky Way look nice. So we will go create new mask, select sky. So we've just taken the sky. And then on the right hand side where the 3 dots are, I'm going to click that and it'll say intersect mask with. I'm going to use a radial gradient. And I'm just going to draw a radial gradient around the Milky Way here. I just want to bring a bit more emphasis on that Milky Way, so I'm just going to bring that down a bit. That, even though that radial filter there is going into the foreground here, it won't actually do that because we're working on a sky mask, so it won't go into the foreground. That's probably good enough on the Milky Way. Then I'll come down to the texture and clarity sliders. And I normally zoom in a fair way on this just to make sure I'm not going overboard with it. Add a little bit of clarity. You can go to about 25 to 30, and a little bit of texture gives your Milky Way a little bit of a pop. And if I turn that on and off, you'll see the difference that's making to the Milky Way, just adding that nice little bit of clarity and texture into the Milky Way. The other thing I will actually do is go to the color temperature and just warm up the Milky Way a bit. Not much, just a little bit, just so those whites aren't white, they're a bit more towards yellow. Probably about 9 or 10. It's just put a little bit more warmth into the Milky Way. Back to there. Next thing I would do is probably just start to work a little bit more on the foreground. So we'll go to the foreground again, create new mask, select sky, hit X to invert it. That's now made a foreground mask. And we now want to go to the foreground mask, to the three little dots, intersect mask with brush. So we're going to pick up our brush, we're going to add a little bit of white, we're going to bring the temperature up a little bit, and we'll just come into the foreground and we can just start to brush into those brighter areas there where the light was. That's probably enough, and you can see what I've done there. Just a bit more there. There, turn that on and off. You can see it's just warmed that foreground up a little bit and added a bit of white. We could potentially lift that white up a little bit more. Next thing I'm going to do is make another layer for the foreground. Create new mask, select sky, hit X again, intersect that mask with a brush, and now I'm going to add a curves layer. I want to add a nice amount of contrast into the foreground, so we'll just brush that through in the foreground, probably into the middle of it as well, but not the very bottom of the foreground. I want to leave just that little bit at the bottom quite dark, just so it sort of leads the eye out into the image a bit more. Now I'm going to come down to my curve. Here's my curve, and I'm just going to pick up the lighter areas in the curve like so. We could even come that way a bit more back. With the curve, you can move this little cursor on the curve up and down to wherever you need it to be. Just think about this as your curve. So this is a reflection. This is your histogram. So your lights are out here, your darks are here. So you might bring it up in the middle like that sort of thing. You can see that's just the mid-tones. It's brought up in the middle of there. That's starting to look pretty good. There's still a bunch of other stuff I do to the photo, but that's starting to look good. Another thing I'll probably do here, create new mask, select sky, hit X to flip that one again. So it's a foreground mask, three dots, intersect mask with radial gradient. Now I just want to make the middle of the image, particularly this dark headland here and out towards the middle of the image, I just want to add a little bit or remove a bit of contrast from there. So I'll lift the blacks up a little bit and lift the shadows up a little bit. And I'll even add a little bit of dehaze in there, just giving a bit of depth to the photo so there's less contrast in the middle. You could potentially try and warm that up a bit in there. Doesn't really do much. It's not too bad. So you can get the idea of where we're starting to head with it. So before and after, that's where we started. That's where we're up to. You could come back to the curves again, the global curves, like for the whole image, not just on a mask. And we could make a bit of a curves adjustment here. We can move the brighter side of the curves over to about there. And we could even bring the dark side of it over a little bit to about there. So we're starting to look pretty good. You can see we've gone from there was our raw file to there. That's as far as I'm going to take it, but it gives you a bit of an idea on what you can actually do, how you can get a Milky Way or a nightscape image that you mightn't be that impressed with the raw file when you open it up, but it doesn't take that much work, and particularly with this new denoise feature that we've got, this thing's an absolute game changer. It just gets rid of so much of that noise. If we zoom in on this image now, you can see that foreground there. There's not very much noise there at all. ISO 8000. The photo looks pretty cool. That's just a basic edit. I'll pull up the video here. That's the last you'll hear from me. Now I'm going to show you some of the images that Lisa and I captured last night, the ones that we've already edited. And I just want to say thanks very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this quick little video. As I always say on my channel, make sure you do me a huge favour. Go ahead, leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of the video. Give me a thumbs up. And if you like the content on my channel, please consider subscribing to the channel. There's plenty more landscape in the field vlogs coming. And also I do plan on doing a few more of these editing videos in the very near future. That's pretty much about it, guys. We'll show you some images, and as I say on all my videos, don't take life too seriously. Stay curious, get out there and shoot and have some fun. We'll see you guys again real soon.